Hi, welcome to this week's Mailbox. Unfortunately, we missed last week's. More on that in a moment. I wonder if you can guess what most of the comments from this week are going to be about. So let's first of all cover those who got the mailbox correctly from not last week, the week before. So for those who are new to this, we just have a little thing where you just sort of have to say where the mailbox is. That's the specific location and the zone that it's in. So this one hopefully was relatively straightforward. We had a few people get this one right. Even Dakota Brown there getting it very specifically. Free win post 1,000 needles. 45.50. I haven't checked those coordinates. They might just be making it up just to sound a bit cleverer there. But yeah, so those were the people who got last week's or the week before, sorry. This week's is here. So again, if you want to say where that is in the comments below, it is. We only need the zone that it's in and the specific locale of that zone. It doesn't need to be coordinates or anything like that. Just the city stroke whatever it is, the little location with that. Right, so let us get on with some comments. So the first one, well, I had to do this one first because it mentioned the mailbox. But just the comment says, on top of the poor communication, this expansion is riddled with bugs. Yeah, found a big one yesterday that nearly screwed over our Demon Hunter. Had people randomly die into beams that were 20 yards away on Mother last night. It's like they can't release a single piece of content that isn't full of bugs. I mean, just on that one, first of all, it's noticeable, isn't it, in BFA? I mean, there was a time when you were expecting a load of bugs. TBC came out a load of bugs. I don't think it was that bad, though. I don't think BFA has been that bad. Obviously, in a situation like this, yeah, if you're getting people dying to a mechanic that they shouldn't be because they're doing it perfectly well, then that's not acceptable. And actually, there were, when you mentioned Mother, there were issues in the beta, I remember, where people were getting killed by things that they shouldn't have done. They were in the right place for it when we were testing Mother. So, a number of these sort of types of bugs were known about. But it's like, I mean, I don't know. It's difficult. Like, from a technical point of view, I'm not an expert. I do understand the concept that you can actually fix a bug and then you fix another bug somewhere else and it creates what might appear to be the same bug again elsewhere and it looks like you haven't fixed it, but you've just created another one. I get that. But there obviously needs to be a process for making sure these sort of things don't go live. I don't think it's acceptable to go live. It's not like it has, there have been times in the past where it's actually been okay. I mean, the very early days of WoW, the first couple of expansions, or the first expansion certainly, bugs were expected. You'd expect a few. You'd still be able to play the game. And then very recently, bugs we don't expect. So that's because we had a 10-year gap between those two events where actually Blizzard did pretty well. Yes, the odd bug came out. And even when it was pretty bad for some people, it was usually only for some people. It's fairly intermittent. But, I think we've been used to the fact that there's been good quality releases. It's always been a big advantage, I think, over getting a World of Warcraft expansion over, say, a new MMO. A new MMO is going to be riddled with bugs. They all are, even the ones that are now good. Like Elder Scrolls Online was horrendous when it never should have released when it did. But we've been used to the fact that the Blizzard expansions, the World of Warcraft expansions have been really good. And it's like, well, they're building on something that's already there. It gives them an advantage. If they start, having people say how buggy the expansions are, they can potentially lose a lot of standing amongst the player community. So this is really, it's really not good. But anyway, on to the last bit there. It says, also, where's the mailbox? Rely on the mailbox each week. Oh, dear. To help me pass the time of work. Yeah, last week. It wasn't, you might think to yourself, oh, I just ran out of time. It wasn't that I ran out of time. I was there all sat to do it. I was going blurry again. Camera. What happened was, I was going down, getting some comments. I thought, oh, there's not very many comments here. And then I looked through at the videos I'd done in the previous week. And I basically thought, oh yeah, it's fairly obvious. I haven't really done any WoW videos. There was the Azeroth review, nearly called it the Azerite review then. Maybe I should have called it that. The Azeroth review and the previous week's mailbox. and there's not enough comments in those to be able to fuel a whole mailbox on its own. And I hadn't really done other like discussion-y based WoW videos, so there was a just complete dearth of comments. That's why, you know, the source material just didn't exist. This week it does exist, because there's been there was going to be anyway, because I thought to myself, oh, definitely need to get some discussion videos out, which I did. But of course, Blizzard, you know, bowled me a nice one by doing the AMA. So, you know, loads of comments. In fact, far more than I can. You know, there'll be some actually good ones I'll not be able to cover today. That will be the shame of that one. Right, so yeah, let's get started. So as soon as it was announced there's going to be an AMA, someone said, "Oh, ready AMA? This is going to be a disaster." Was it? Some people will say yes, it was. Some people not so much. Obviously, so far, at the point I'm doing this, all I've done so far is the critical review of it. I think there were some good points to it, but even the good points, I'm going to be honest, when I do that video, which is pretty much straight after this, if I'm going to be honest about that, then even the positive things are things that they never should have had to apologise for and fix in the first place, because, as a lot of people are noting out, a lot of these things are supposed to be the things that are cleared up in beta. You know. So, first one then. It says, I've noticed there is a discrepancy between Simcraft and what's going on in the game. I know that developers have noted there are some code that is quote-unquote a wacky way, or hacky way. I think it's supposed to be wacky way of getting it to work. I have the 340 Azeroth chests with Thunderous Blast and 370 chests with the Uldir trait. They sim very close to each other. Either SimC is off or Azeroth traits are just poorly planned out. Inclined to believe the latter. It can be a bit of both. The thing is with Simulation Craft is the Azeroth traits are not always obvious how they work. Like when people are building up Simcraft, there are certain things you just look at it and it's like, okay, I know how that works. You don't have to go and try it out. You do anyway. That's why they need us, when we get into alpha and beta, they will ask for people to just basically hit a training dummy for a good long time and send in the log so they can see exactly how abilities are working in practice. But bear in mind, sometimes if ability doesn't work how its tooltip would suggest, that could actually be a bug in the ability. And then they raise that to Blizzard and they go, usually they'll say, oh yeah, it's not supposed to work like that at all. There's been numerous situations like that. But a lot of abilities, whether it be an ability for your class or what used to be on tier armor, tier set bonuses, or trinkets, things like that, you look at it and you get the information how it's supposed to work. So you can actually code it into Simcraft without having someone test it over and over again. You do the testing over again just to make sure that that is actually how it's supposed to be doing, like I said. A lot of the Azeroth traits, it's not actually clear how they're supposed to work just reading the tooltip. It doesn't actually give you that much information. So the only way to be able to model it, well, there's two ways you could model it. One, could ask Blizzard to say, how the bloody hell does this work? But they tend not to be very forthcoming with that. Even though it's in Blizzard's interest that Simcraft be accurate because they use it themselves, they're not usually very forthcoming. They will usually clarify to the people who build it. You know, if they say, look, we think it's working like this, is it? They will often say yes or no, but they're very cagey about it. You got to remember, they have this weird relationship with modelling and theory crafters in the game. Like, they've publicly said many times they wish people didn't know how the game worked because, you know, when people are min-maxing, it sort of allows them to get through the content very quickly. Now, that used to be the default position back in Ghostcrawler's day. That was definitely the default position. We do not like the fact that people... It's not that they were opposed to it. They didn't do anything to block it. They just wished we didn't do it. Whereas now it's more of a case they still wish that, but at the same time, they also understand that they benefit because it allows us to find bugs. It means Blizzard have a better... ironically, a better chance of reducing those bugs and things that just don't work properly. So it's a really weird thing, but they have both of those points of view at the same time. So it's like sometimes they will confirm how things work and sometimes they won't. And like, as I say, you know, most class abilities, it's pretty straightforward how they work. It's fairly clear what they do. You know what type of damage it does, you know what the cooldown is, you know how much damage it does based on various stats, things like that, which is all you need to know. because you've got the formula for it. You can data mine all that information. That's all fine. Azerite traits, some of them are also fine, some of them, but a lot of them weren't, particularly with things like stacking, how they stack together, because sometimes they stack together in a very obvious way. Sometimes they, the same traits stack together in rather non-obvious ways. So there's an awful lot of that as well. So yeah, it could be a little bit Simcraft, but it is also definitely the case that Azerite traits have been poorly planned out as well. There's so much work being done on them now that it's live. So much work being done on them because a lot of them are so far out. It's untrue. It's not been a good system. It's not been well implemented. The Azerite trait system, from a technical point of view, is the impression I'm getting. But yeah, so it could. There are certain things, but there also have been buffs and nerfs. Bear in mind, and obviously. Because Blizzard don't... Remember, not everything is announced. You might look at a list of hotfixes. Oh, those are the things that Blizzard have fixed. No, that's just a selection. They can, when they bring out some hotfixes, they might hotfix 2,000 things. You don't get a list of 2,000 things in a forum post. It's just the headline things that you're getting. So sometimes as well, things are changed in there. And if it's not announced, it needs someone to spot that it's been changed, which then leads for at least a day or two before Simcraft can be updated. And then if you're, again, noticing discrepancies between Simcraft and what's going on in the game, I would say also what version of Simcraft you're using, because there's the weekly version, which obviously is only going to get updated once a week, but then there's the nightly version, which gets updated every day. So you need to check which version you're using as well. So if you're using Simcraft yourself on your own computer, you need to be downloading it every day. If you're using Raidbots, tick the nightly builds rather than the weekly builds. Because especially at the start of an expansion, it's not very stable because Blizzard are changing lots of things and people are But I think we've got to a point now where it is known how things work. So if there is a discrepancy, it's almost, not certainly, but it's almost certainly down to actual changes that are happening. And there are still many of those still happening. And there will be a whole raft of them next week. In fact, and this is sort of expected. Ordinarily, you expect this, don't you? So what's supposed to happen is during the beta, there's supposed to be a rough cut of everything. So everything's sort of okay. It'll need tweaking. Then it all goes live, and then they mess about a bit. Then the first week of the raid comes out, the normal and heroic. There's load more data. That's what they want. Then they tweak it a little bit more. Then the first week of mythic, and after that, that's when they'll do their not just tweaking, but maybe some, actual class balancing, stuff like that as well. So next week is likely to be the big one in terms of changes, after which traditionally it should settle down a bit. But because there have been so many issues, who knows? I really don't know anymore. We're into sort of uncharted territory here. Next one, it says, I feel that BFA was rushed. They simply bit off more than they could chew. Was it rushed? It certainly wasn't ready. I think I would definitely agree that it wasn't ready. Whether it was rushed or not is another matter. My issue is that there was an awful lot of stuff that they were spending a lot of developer time on that wasn't to our benefit. So they shouldn't have done it. It was to feed some philosophy they have. Classic example, which I haven't moaned about for a bit, so I can bring it back again, was the GCD changes. So they put a load more things than had been the case on the GCD. And I have a completely different philosophy to Blizzard on the GCD thing, of course. So, of course, I'm going to moan about this. But even without that, it was not something that received wide, or even, indeed, any significant support amongst the community. Blizzard haven't given their reason for doing it beyond, we just think it makes better gameplay. There was no actual technical justification for it, which suggests that they have a reason for it, but it's a reason they can't be honest about. It might be a perfectly good reason, but they haven't said it, and it's not obvious. So, but the bottom line is they made this change, and just like with everything else to do with classes in BFA, they completely misjudged it. And I don't just mean misjudged the reaction from the community, they misjudged the implementation. So then there was a whole series of weeks and weeks tying up the time of the class designers, trying to, put some things, take some things back off it and massaging it around and messing about with it. If they'd have simply gone, oh, okay, it's not working quite how we wanted, we're going to have to do a load of work on this, and then they'd have also said, but you know what, we're really hard pushed, let's just leave it and do it later on. That would have been the best thing to do. We're rushed, this is a low priority thing, it's not something that the community are even wanting, let's just put it on the back burner. And there was an awful lot of time wasted. The simple fact that they thought they could get away with removing artifacts and not having to do wholesale changes to classes was itself ridiculous. So I'm not sure I would allow them to feel... Because if I say that BFA was rushed, that's basically me saying that Blizzard weren't given the resources, which is going to come up in another statement, another little comment, to do the job. They may or may not have been, but I don't think they used their resources efficiently, because there were certain things that took a lot of development time and resources with a small payoff, if there was any payoff at all, from their point of view, that they should have just shelled. They're not very good at prioritising, is what I would say. I don't think they're good at prioritising. Another thing to do with islands, they're saying in the AMA, we're going to incentivise islands a bit better. It's like, well, people were saying, well, why wasn't it there from the start? I was worried about islands a lot in alpha, never mind beta, early alpha, when they were saying they're not sure what they're doing with islands. Islands is just the manifestation of a piece of technology they want to put in the game, but they don't actually know or they didn't at the time know what they want to do with islands. Maybe they've got a better idea now and they just need the time to implement it. I don't know. But they didn't at the time, and this was months after BlizzCon when it was announced, and therefore many months after it was done. They had no idea what the purpose of it was in the expansion. Absolute madness. Yeah, I think it's a case of being inefficient rather than having too much to do. Next one. So yeah, the Horde burned down Teldrassil, but there's more to the story, just stay tuned. Yeah, Shaman and Shadow Priest are in a bad place. We'll fix them later, and they're not the only ones. Yeah, Warfronts have a lot of downtime where you can't do stuff, but there will be more later. Yeah, Horde have unique mounts, while Alliance have a bunch of horses, but we'll add more mounts later. We'll fix Azeroth later. I think the implication on this one is, bear with us, it'll all turn out all right in the end, but there's so many things that will turn all right in the end that should people really have faith that that's the case. On the first point, the story thing, ordinarily, that would be perfectly valid. I think the problem is that some aspects of the story writing has been so poor, even though I did say it was in one of my top 5 features of the expansion, just because it's got people talking, that you can have no confidence that the story will have a good payoff. I think that's the problem with it. Maybe it will, but maybe it won't. If you can be confident that it's going to have a good payoff, or this is going to be good, because you have confidence in the writers, then it's not an issue that something strange happens that you don't know the reason for, because that's good. That gets your anticipation up. I think the issue is that there might not be a good enough payoff. On to the next one. You say Shaman and Shadow Priest in a bad place, will fix them later. They may be the lucky ones, as baffling as it may seem. They may be the lucky ones, because Blizzard have at least acknowledged that they have issues. There are some others that don't. Feral Druids apparently in a pretty bad place as well. So, there may be some classes that Blizzard are not talking about that are in a bad place. If Blizzard are not talking about them, then can you even have any confidence that they're going to do something about it? It's poor. I always say it's really poor. It's no good just saying, oh, Shaman and Shadow Priest will do something in patch 8.1, because that's not good enough. People have made their decisions about what they need to play early on. And it's not just the individual players that are hurt. Whole guilds are hurt. Team-based guilds, whether it be raiding guilds or PvP guilds, are hurt by the fact that there might come a point where they do fix them. Maybe it's 8.1 and they're all fine and dandy. And all of a sudden then there's a dearth of those sort of players. So then many guilds are going, Shadow Priests are going to be really strong in the Ashara raid, or whatever raid comes out in December. I doubt that's going to be the Ashara one. It might be something else. And it'd be like, but there's not enough of them because it was so bad at the start of the expansion that too few people were playing them. Or even if there were people playing them, they weren't able to get into the competitive stuff, so they're sort of behind in terms of gear and experience and that sort of thing. It's, it's a shocker. But at the very least, Shamans and Shadow Priests know they're going to get some love. It may not be enough. It may or may not be. It may go too far the other way. Who knows? But yeah, pity the poor Feral Druid and anyone else that's got some serious issues. Is what I would say to that one. In terms of Warfronts were always going to be dull right from the start. Again, I think they're like Islands. I think Warfronts is testing a technology for something. I think that's what it is. It doesn't seem to me that someone came up with Warfronts has been a great idea and then developed the technology to do it. It seems to me that someone said, oh, I've got this cool technology. Can we think of a way to use it? Because it's dull. It was dull from the start. It was dull when it was announced. You know, I've said this before and I'll say it again. When it was announced, like, oh, do you remember Warcraft? Wouldn't it be cool if you can be one of the little guys? No. No, it wouldn't be cool if I could be one of the little guys. That's a bit like looking at a football match and saying, oh, do you see that grass down there? Wouldn't it be cool if you can be one of the blades of grass? No, it wouldn't. So Warfronts for me was always going to be dreadfully dull. And it doesn't matter how much they incentivized it again too much, didn't they? You know, they had I didn't even know this. I didn't even realize this until they sort of did something to fix it or announce the fix. Anyone could get into them. So you could have freshly dinged characters getting into them, getting a 340 piece each time. It's I mean, I already thought before this. And if you're a Horde, of course, sorry, Alliance, yeah, you haven't had that opportunity yet and you're never going to. But then, as I've already said, Alliance don't exist anymore. I mean, someone was asking me why I've gone Horde, and I said, well, it's because or when I went Horde, I think they asked. I said it was when Blizzard completely removed the Alliance faction, and that any Alliance players you may see from time to time are just a result of your fevered imagination. Alliance don't exist. It's just some Twilight Zone rubbish going on now. I forgot what I was talking about now. Bugger. But, oh yeah, Warfronts. Yeah, so you could just go in and get yourself fully geared up. Now they've put, you've got to be like item level 320 to get in. But at the time, yeah, you could just spam them, get 340. And I was thinking that it's already too quick to be able to level. I'm a casual now, and I mean a proper casual. I'm even more casual than I'd intended to be. And not because I'm not enjoying it, just because that's just the way it is. I'm spending about the same amount of time I was expecting to spend in it. But I've geared up. You know, not to the point where I'm doing the plus 10s each week. We did a plus 9 this week. If we'd have maybe got kind of keys, we might have, well, I'm sure we would have been able to do a plus 10, but it would have been sort of not on time. But because the gear is not going to be up to the point where it would be if I were raiding. But nonetheless, it's still high enough that in the second week of doing Mythic Pluses with another group of casual scrubs, we've done a plus 9. You know. And actually, we would have done it on time as well. We actually would have done it on time and got a 10 to be able to then just do that as long as it took. But unfortunately, a drunk came into Discord, the voice comms, and was suddenly then proceeded to wipe 6 times because they were telling us their stories of what they've been up to whilst they've been out drinking. Oh my God, social life. You don't have to put up with these things as a raider. So yeah, anyway. But yes, I mean, I think this is the issue that Blizzard are just sort of saying, yeah, we know that's broken, we'll fix it. Yeah, that's broken, we'll fix it. Yeah, we'll fix it. And even if we sort of believe them, and I believe them when they say they're going to fix something, there's so much to fix. So much. And also, think about it this way. Remember what they've said. Like, now is the time they're working on the next expansion as well. So, they've got to... Because this is what they're saying, isn't it? Because there was this weird situation with WoD and Legion where they did it in parallel, and then that sort of stopped because I think that was when they were trying to do annual expansions. That was non-starter from the start. And then they said, BFA, they started that as soon as Legion launched. So there was obviously a whole group of developers no longer working on Legion. They weren't needed. Just a few to tidy things up and keep things going. So the same thing presumably is happening now, except is it? Because if there's so many problems here that they need all that manpower, they've got to draw them in from, the next expansion, Return of the Potato People, and then that means work on that gets pushed back. So maybe the next expansion we have more problems because they didn't get enough time to spend on that. And in the meantime, they're still not working efficiently because they're still making the same mistakes. Because there's no acknowledgement of what I consider to be the fundamental problems with them wasting time on things with very small payouts. Let's move on, for I could just spend a whole video just on this. Right then. Oh, well, this is related. Carry on. Someone saying, I've been thinking about Ian expressing not enough manpower, but what if Activision is holding him hostage at gunpoint? I don't think it'll be actually at gunpoint. Even though it is America, I'm pretty sure that doesn't happen in boardrooms. For spending too much money to try and make a great game. Loot boxes incoming. Well, there's a few things in there. The first one. Is that Activision holding him hostage, blah, blah, blah? It's very likely to be the opposite way around. When someone goes out and publicly says, as a leader of a team, the reason for these problems is we just don't have enough people for doing it. It's usually the other way around. It's usually the person saying that trying to hold the people holding the purse strings hostage by saying, it's their fault that this game isn't quite good enough. If I'd have been given the people I'd asked for, then it would have all been fine. It's sometimes a way of trying to get a bigger budget by saying that, we're going to lose our standing here. It's going to reduce less sales. We're actually, because the amount of money that gets funneled back into World of Warcraft for development, although their budget would be the envy, I imagine, of many other MMOs, it's still a very small proportion of the overall profits. So he could be trying to make the argument that you will make more profits by providing the appropriate budget. Give me enough people to make it good, because otherwise we're going to lose a higher proportion of players from it than you're saving by being mealy-mouthed with the budget. So it could be him holding them hostage or attempting to. That being said, I also understand, and this is why sometimes when I'm going to criticise anything the developer says, I always have in the back of my mind, is the reason they're doing this not their decision? Because sometimes I think they just have a poor philosophy towards the game. That's why I disagree with them on things. But sometimes I feel that certain things are in the game, not because they want it to be, but because they're told it has to be for economic reasons. And, because they have bosses. Ultimately, the boss of any company is the person who has the money. It's not even necessarily the CEO of the company. It can be whoever is providing the funding for it, whoever holds, whoever owns it from that point of view. So, shareholders, ultimately, or people representing shareholders, investment groups. So there could be an awful lot of that into it. Now, when it comes to loot boxes, there are so many ways, and I've said this before, there are so many ways that Blizzard could generate extra money without loot boxes. I also think they'd be unlikely to. The thing about loot boxes is I can certainly see in some parts of the world, I can certainly see in Europe, if loot boxes carry on going the way they're going, or even just stay the way they are, I can see there being regulations put in place to curb them. I can see governments getting involved. They've already, and I know in Europe, have already shown a little bit of disdain for them. And it may not affect, some markets, it may not affect, it's very unlikely to affect the American market. American governments tend not to get involved in things to actually, for the benefit of their people. In Britain, it probably won't either, but in Europe, I can absolutely see it being. And that's a significant market. They're much better off going down an area. They haven't even tried expanding they dip their fingers into it, or the toes into it, whatever we want to call it. There's like 3 cosmetic items you can buy in the online store, and that was like years ago. They could easily do that. I would take a leaf out of the book of some MMOs. I mean, I talk about Elder Scrolls Online. They do have loot boxes. Actually, ironically, I have to remember after this I need to log on. Because the only time I don't ever buy loot boxes on there. The only time I ever get them, though, every now and then, they've done it this weekend, they do a thing where if you log on and kill a thing, you just have to go out and kill a rat or, well, not a rat, but a monkey will do, or an armadillo, whatever you can find out there. Just go log on, basically, kill something, and you get a loot box for each day for 3 days. So I'll get 3 free loot boxes, which you get some nice stuff in them, but I'm not paying money for them. But they shouldn't be there. But aside from that, the stuff that's on the Elder Scrolls Online store, I think is really good. Actually, also Elder Scrolls Online, in terms of getting people to log on every day, it's loads better as well. Because, like, what do Blizzard do? They give us a load of content that we feel compelled to do. Now, as a casual, I don't anymore. I don't even do all my emissary caches. And nor did I even at the start. But Elder Scrolls Online, you log on there, you get a reward. Like, I logged on yesterday, and I got an experience scroll. If I log on today, I'll get some gold. You know, each day, you just have these rewards. So that just encourage you to log on. It's not compelling you to, because if you don't want to play for a little while, well, don't. Because they're not the sort of the rewards that you're going to need to increase the power of your character. But there's nice little rewards. It might be some consumables or, you know, gold or something like that. You know, experience scroll, like I say, something like that. But yeah, I don't think loot box. I just have an inkling, and you can never say never. The thing is, like, there's a whole host of things that you can do, and the games that have loot boxes have all the other stuff in between as well. I don't see it makes any sense for Blizzard to go from where they are with virtually nothing on the online store to loot boxes. It's a huge shift. There's a chasm between where we are now and loot boxes. There's loads of stuff they could put in between that I know some, for some reason, because they'd say it on videos whenever I mention it, there would be opposed to it, but most wouldn't, because it's cosmetic things. I mean, I don't, you know, if you're going to charge for cosmetic things that don't affect the power of your character, as long as it's not play to win. Play to win? No, you must play to win. Pay to win. Then I don't have an issue with it, and most don't as well, even though some do. But those are the things you would do first. Of course, there's loads of things you could do. But anyway, so yeah, I don't think loot boxes. I really don't see loot boxes in anything like the short or even medium term. All right, next one. Yes, the H word was used. It says, I wish there were hybrids in the game still. So this is for those who didn't watch this stuff on the AMA. Ian Hazacosta says, after several years of trying to stop people talking about hybrids, saying there is no hybrids, there's no hybrid tats because there's no hybrids in the game anymore, he then used the word hybrid in a different context, but he's used the bloody thing. So someone's saying, I wish there were hybrids in the game still, not in changing roles on the fly, that makes them OP, but having ability to play to help plug roles and have great utility and support in a significant way for raids or Mythic Plus or even PvP. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I mean, I sort of wish it too. I mean, I was thinking, you know, because people kept asking with Paladin, you know, what would you do about seal? It's a shame there's no seals in the game, and how could you do that? And the old seal system sure wasn't great. And the way I would have done it is something like, you know, as a talent row where you pick a seal that determines how you're going to play. So there'd be one version which is much as we are now. Another seal that you could take that would, and it's not something you can change in game, it's something you select beforehand that would allow you to do less single target damage but more AoE damage. And then another one, you know, a bit like with a Disciplined Priest, that would reduce your overall damage significantly, but your damage and abilities would do heals, you know, to those around you. So you could be like a Disciplined Priest or a Disciplined Priest from Legion. I don't fully get how they work now because I haven't tried them out. But, you know, a half and half, healer and DPS. You're doing some DPS, but you're not up to a full DPS. That sort of thing would be ideal, you know, for those situations where, particularly Mythic progress, where you think to yourself, okay, if we could drop a healer, we could get an extra DPS in, beat that DPS check, job's a good one. But then you think you drop the healer and you can't quite manage the healing. It's like, oh, we could just do with half a healer and half a DPS. Enter the Ret Paladin with that seal talent. You know, bit of DPS, some healing. Not going to do enough not going to be as good healing as a full healer, not as good DPS as a full DPS. Half and half. You know, so I wish those sort of roles were in as well. But they're not. It's not part of the Blizzard philosophy. I don't think it ever really was as well, although I said, like in vanilla as a Paladin, you know, the old 10-10-31, which was my initial spec for raiding would allow you to heal as well as DPS as well as do other things. I don't think that was really a philosophy. I think they were just throwing things together in the very old style RPG format. I don't think things were fully thought through, because as soon as TBC came round and they properly thought about the specs, they became much more niche at that point. Next one says, this is a good video. This is the one about the AMA. What happens when lead designers are so seeped in the meta that they can't take a step back and spot the obvious? However, my point still stands. If you don't like the game and company, then vote with your wallet and walk away. As someone who moans and yet logs on, just won't have the credibility that, say, plunging revenues will. The thing is, though, I do like the game. I do like the company. It's still worth it. That's the thing. Like the complaints that I will have, it's not because I'm not saying it's a bad game. If it was a bad game, I would totally quit. I did quit before. I've quit the game before in Wrath when I thought to myself, this is a bad game, and I stopped playing it. In Wrath, people were amazed at that. Well, Wrath was awesome, wasn't it? Not for me. It wasn't at the start. You know, clearing every raid boss in a week was not my idea. I wasn't a world first raider. It was far from it. Was not my idea of a good game. I expected progress, not walking up to a boss and hitting it and it dying. So, yeah, I know it got better, but I didn't know it was going to get better. So I quit the game. But the thing is now, it is totally worth it. The way I sort of liken it, it's a bit like going to a restaurant and you get terrible service. They're absolutely appalling. Dreadful customer service. The food takes ages to come out. It's a proper kitchen nightmares. Except the food that does come out, when it comes out, is absolutely delicious. It's fantastic. And you therefore think, well, I'm disappointed in the service. It should be better. But it's still worth it, because it's still really nice. And that's what I think World of Warcraft's like. I still think it's really nice. Put it this way, right? When I was saying I was going to go casual, I had to go casual just because of work. Work was going to be impossible. And it's actually got even worse. You know, the extra work I knew I was going to have at work, which is, of course, always got to be the priority. That's what pays the bills. As bad as I thought it was going to be this year, with lots of extra stuff to do, it's even more. You know, there's lots of unexpected things happen this term, which take even more time away than I expected. But I was expecting going casual, I'd have more time to play things like Elder Scrolls Online. I haven't, actually. I haven't. And part of that is because of work, but part of it is just because, you know, I'm still enjoying playing World of Warcraft. I would totally step back. I would totally at least, because at the moment I'm only spending time on one character anyway, I could easily cancel the subscriptions on my 2 other accounts. I've got 3 accounts going. I'm not actually spending any, well, that was another account to take this, the Mailbox image today, but I could easily have done that on a character on my main account. So yeah, I could save myself money by doing that, but I feel it's still worth it, even paid for 3 accounts. And the expansion, I think it's worth it. I'm happy to pay that money for what I get. It's just, I know they're capable of better. So that's where I'm critical. I criticise because I know it could be better. Just like going to the restaurant with the amazing food, I know that their service could be better. And that's really where it is for me. But absolutely, if you get someone who actively dislikes the game, then yes, you shouldn't carry on playing it. You should never, ever carry on playing a game because you think it might improve in a month. Wait for it to improve. If it improves in a month, absolutely, I would say in that case, yeah, cancel your sub. If it does improve, if people have told you it's improved in a month, then come back to it. Never pay your sub for a game you don't like just because you think it might improve. It's a bit like Boogie will always say about advance orders. He says never get advanced orders. I don't go that far. I do. But I would certainly say never get, because you're giving the company money before they've even had to do anything. So it gives them less incentive. Because I think the idea is that if a company isn't going to get any money at all for a game or an expansion until it launches, they have to make absolutely certain the launch is going to be amazing. Because if those first few press reports come out as being negative, that, because there's been quite a lot of people will wait a day to see what it's been like. Whereas if you get a load of advance orders, you've got the money in the bank. Without having to have a good launch, you've got the money in the bank, you've made your money. And I think that's where the distinction is there. So what I would say about the advance orders, certainly, unless you're totally confident that you're going to be enjoying it, don't pay it. But I do. I think it's worth it. So I'm going to carry on paying it. And yes, I know my complaints will have no credibility as a result of it from Blizz's point of view, because I'm giving them the money anyway, and I've just said publicly that I will carry on giving them the money until it actually does get bad. But that's a personal call for people. On to the next one. So, bugs. So it's also on the bugs. Open up a proper issue tracker, not some expletive deleted forum like they have now. That would greatly improve the signal to noise ratio. Yeah, I actually thought about that signal to noise ratio comment that they made. And they talked about it. I didn't actually realise this, even when I read it out and did the video, because I was just glancing through it. And I think they used the term signal to noise ratio incorrectly as well. Because they talked about the signal to noise ratio being too high. You want it to be high. High would mean really good feedback. Noise is the bad bit. They seem to be suggesting that the signal is the bad bit and the noise is the good bit. No, it's the other way around. But then again, he's not a physicist. He's he's a lawyer, isn't he? He's legally trained. Doesn't understand these things. But anyway, forget about that. But yeah, so in terms of their issue with all this wibbly wobbly feedback, it is true, and people have. I should do this. The way to report bugs is very poor. In fact, you could almost do with something a bit like in the beta that we had this time, which wasn't a new feature I've said before. I remember it being in Wrath beta. It may have been even before then, but Wrath beta was the first beta I ever did. Where you have a little box. Now, I wouldn't suggest having a little box like it is in beta, because you don't want it in your way all the time when you're playing the game. But to have a button, like in the help thing, which can bring up something better. So, yeah, you do want a situation where it's quick and easy to report bugs. And that it can, that a lot of the information can be filled in. So, like for where you are and things like that. Yeah, they could do better with the way that we can fill out bug reports. That would help. But again, it doesn't help if they're not very good at dealing with them. Like someone was mentioning yesterday, there can be an issue, and I don't know whether this is the case at Blizzard or not, but from people who work in similar industries, it can be an issue. Don't just assume it won't be an issue because it's such a stupid thing to do. Where if someone reports a bug and it's not reproducible, they just say, oh, it's just one of those things, and they leave it. Whereas what should be the case is, if someone reports a particular bug and you can't reproduce it, but then 100 of other people report the same bug, then it doesn't matter whether you can reproduce it or not. It's an issue that you need to look at, not discount because you can't reproduce it. So there might be some of that going on as well. Especially, it sort of brought to my mind when we're reporting bugs months, ahead of the release, and it's still there in release. I think to myself, is it because they did fix it, but then they did something else and it broke again? Which is possible. It can just look, like I said before, it can look to us like they didn't fix it, but maybe they did, but something else broke it again. Or is it the case that if they can't reproduce it, that they discount it, even if there's loads of people reporting it? I don't know. That would be disappointing. But apparently it's the sort of thing that does happen. Next one says, you should find a nice social guild full of baboons and raid like once a week with them. It's still fun even though everyone is bad. No, this is the thing. It could be argued maybe I'd have been better off doing that. I don't know though, because the problem with that is, at the moment I'm not even getting any raid. I thought at least I might get normal runs and a few heroic runs every now and then. I'm not even getting that. I'm not desperate to either. If I was, I'd have been getting into pugs. I could do it. I'm not actually that desperate. I'd prefer to do it with people I know. So from that point of view, maybe with a guild, I'd at least do more raiding than I'm doing now. However, it's not fun. It's not fun. It's powerfully unfun. Anyone who's watched me raid, it doesn't matter whether it's in a pug or even guild run or anything like that, I do not have a good time when people are making the same mistakes over and over. I'm totally fine with people making mistakes, even if it's a stupid mistake. We all make mistakes. but people making the same mistake over and over again. And whether it's an individual player making that mistake, or if it's the raid leader persisting in a strategy that could clearly be improved because we're wiping because of a particular way we're doing it, doesn't matter what the mistake is, repeated mistakes I do not find fun. So the idea, even though if you step down from being a casual, going to a heroic progress guild might sound great, and it might have a lovely atmosphere with lovely people, I would not find it fun, and I would moan like hell, and I would actually be the toxic player, which is that's not fun for anyone, because I would eventually lose it. Why are you studying the fire again? Fire is hot. You learnt that when you were 2 years old, and if you didn't think fire was hot in a game, pixel fire hurts too. You've learnt that the last 10 times you've died by standing in that exact same spot. That is how I would be. So, and heck, it's probably more fun. No, for some people, yes. Some people will just, go with the flow. And generally, in most aspects of life, I'm like that. I'm considered at work to be extremely chill. Nothing phases me. When it comes to something like this, it does. It really does. I'm not a very shouty person, but I will explode at some point. Next one. So, question. Someone's saying their question on Reddit. Previously, it was stated that classes will not be receiving new abilities and mechanics unless there is a purpose behind it. If this is true, then why is it that classes were pruned in order to make room for new abilities and mechanics that need not have been added? It was stated that at the end of Mist, developers struggled to think of new abilities to add to classes because they were already well-rounded. If the prior statement were true, then the most logical solution would be to add nothing else onto the classes, as there was no longer any purpose in doing so. In short, why did such a large sacrifice have to be made in order to pursue an action which contradicts with Blizzard's stated design philosophies? Well, quite. And it's not the only example of that as well. It is perfectly true that, yes, there have been abilities added which you wouldn't have thought were really needed for certain classes, and other ones removed. Yes, I mean, the thing that brought to mind for me was in that January Q&A, which is the first Q&A where they talked about Battle for Azeroth, or really they were rounding off Legion and looking ahead at Battle for Azeroth because it had already been announced. Ian Hazacosta specifically said, he answered a question, which I thought, oh great, I should send that person some muffins as well. The person who asked the question and got it answered. Because this has been my gripe through Legion. They kept talking about class fantasy. They used it basically as a phrase to just shut down any argument where they didn't want to argue on logical grounds. They just went, oh, class fantasy. But it wasn't class fantasy. It was spec fantasy. And they kept trying to use the justification, oh, there was too much homogenization before. There has never been homogenization of classes. At no point in this game have classes ever been similar to each other. Never been the case. Every class has always had its own unique identity and played differently within the confines of the way the gameplay is in World of Warcraft, of course. So that's a nonsense. But what he said was, they said, look, it's been less about class fantasy and more about spec fantasy. And he agreed, and he even conceded the point that, yes, abilities shouldn't be spec specific, like utility abilities in particular. Obviously, Frostbolt should be for Frost Mages, not Fire Mages, things like that. But utility abilities should be across the class, and the individual specs, they have their particular flavour there. He did give the caveats, to be fair, of healers, certain healing cooldowns being for just healers. That shouldn't be across the class. Fine, no problem there. But the thing is, they didn't do that. So what should have happened then is all the utility abilities that a class had should have been shared across the specs, with the exception of the ones designated as strong healer cooldowns, which should only be for the healing specs of the classes that play there. But that didn't happen. He even said that. He agreed with that, and it didn't happen. That's not good either. That's really poor. That's shockingly poor, in fact. I mean, he's even gone completely the other way. He said in the AMA, I'm pretty sure it was him that said it. Sometimes I forget who said it, whether Ian or Josh, but I'm pretty sure it was Ian that said this. He even said, it's like we've got 36 classes. It's now gone completely the other way. Each spec, he's used the words, they're treating each spec as if it's its own class, which is a world away from what he was saying in January. And there's only one of two conclusions you can draw, because you've got to remember, he's the game director. He's not just the person who's been broomed on into the public view and who has to then answer all the questions. He's not the PR guy. He's the head. Obviously, PR is part of his job, but he's the head of the game design. So the two conclusions I can draw. So in January, he says one thing. Now we've got another. And it was long before now that decision was made, by the way. So one of two things that I can conclude, because I don't conclude from that, he just says whatever and then does something different. I don't think that's the explanation, because he could just not have answered that question. Either he is a person that keeps changing his mind. When you've got something as complex as this, where when you change a design philosophy, it has so many knock-on effects to other teams and their work, you can literally waste 3 months of a developer's time by changing a philosophy, because they would design it for one philosophy and then you change it. I get the same thing in my work. I do a lot of planning over summer for the year ahead. If when we get back in the new term, the managers just suddenly stand up and say, oh, by the way, we're going to have a new philosophy this year, which has happened to me a couple of times in my career. It's like, all right, great. You couldn't have told me that before summer, because now you've ruined a load of my work. The same thing happens at Blizzard, much more so. They're working on because sometimes it's easy to blame the class designers for a lot of class things, but to be fair to them, they have their lines that they have to follow. They're like trains. The track gets laid down for them. Very little variation until you get to the points. So when that changes the direction they're going in all of a sudden. And it's like, well, you've now wasted a load of my time, and then you've got even less time to get stuff ready. So it's no wonder classes are in a mess this time, because they changed the philosophy so many times. So yeah, you've either got someone in charge of the whole process who keeps changing his mind, which is no good, or worse still, or just as bad, can't decide, he's someone who has a philosophy, then someone else chirps in his ear that he should change it completely, and he caves into them. Instead of going, no, we all agreed this, we all decided this, this was our philosophy, we're screwing loads of other teams over if we suddenly change midstream, unless there's a super compelling reason to do so. This is our attitude, this is what we're going to do. That's how it should have been out. It should have been, at the point at which he was describing these things in January, the lay of the land should have been set. There should have had to have been an earth-shattering reason to change from that point on. So I don't know which of those two is correct, but I can't believe there can be a third explanation for this disparity between, saying one thing. I mean, going back to WoD, obviously, things can change, definitely. But, in terms of other changes to design philosophies, no design philosophy of BFA should have been changed in the year 2018. Yeah, anyway. Right, on to the last one, which is a bit of a curious one, really. It's not really a normal comment. Because, it says, when he talked about Josh writing the word solve corrects its solution, because, he used the word solve as a noun. And then someone saying, I don't know if it's a US thing, so maybe some people can help us out here. But there's a wave of marketing, expletive deleted, out here where they make nouns out of verbs in order to sound like they are modern or using buzzwords. The one I hate is spend as a noun, as in let's make the best of your spend. Yeah, I hope that's not the case. I don't know if it is the case. I hope it's not. Because the thing about that is, when it comes to marketing, you have to bear in mind, someone who's good at marketing has two qualities. One, the ability to understand what their market wants. And two, charisma. Neither of the, although both of those in theory can be taught, like anything can be taught, they can also come very naturally to people. So in other words, what I would say about this is people who are good at marketing are not necessarily well educated. So the fact that certain things in marketing circles may come out like this would be one thing. I'd be very disappointed if someone working for Blizzard, whom I regard the gaming industry, players in the gaming industry tend to be pretty well educated, I think I find. And therefore, as much or more so, the people who develop these games tend to be very well educated as well. whether it be education in terms of academic education or just the fact that these are the sort of people who have inquiring minds and learn things for themselves. So it would be disappointing. But he did use a couple of funny phrases, didn't he? I'm trying to think of one he used. He used outward facing. He used the phrase outward facing in regard to community engagement. So I suppose the sort of person that uses words that don't normally belong in that context, when there's perfectly good words he could have used instead, potentially is the sort of person that would come out with a load of what are considered modern, trendy buzzwords. So maybe he is doing it for that reason. I don't know. Maybe someone in the US could explain. I don't know. But anyway, there we go. That probably took... I don't actually time this. I never time my videos, but this one feels like it took a little bit. So hopefully that compensates a little bit for the one that wasn't last week. I will have to make sure... But I have to make... I mean, at the moment, it's quite easy to do discussion videos. There'll be more coming. I need to make sure there's at least 1 or 2 each week, don't I? To make sure we feed the mailbox each week. But yes, keep the comments coming. And thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share with other people who may also be interested. Let me know where you think the mailbox is in the comments below as well. And until next time, I'll see you later.